Why did he laugh? That sound, sharp jeering, meant to humiliate, cut through the still night air like shrapnel. Soldiers nearby shifted uncomfortably, boots scraping on the wet pavement. But she didn't move. Not yet. Her hands remained steady on the sling of her rifle. Her eyes fixed forward, locked on nothing, on everything. The street lamps buzzed above, pouring a pale yellow halo over the stone steps of the memorial. She stood guard, silent, unflinching. The man's mocking voice rose again. "What's she gonna do, huh? Just stand there all night looking tough?" His friends snickered behind him, emboldened by his cruelty. They didn't know, or maybe they did, and they wanted to test it anyway. She breathed once slowly, in through her nose. The cool autumn air stung her throat, carrying the faint scent of burning leaves from some unseen backyard fire. Out through her lips, controlled, deliberate. The step, that single movement, wasn't just a step. Not for her, not for them. It was a warning older than her uniform, older than her own story. And yet it had never felt more personal than it did tonight. Because this wasn't just duty, this was memory, this was penance. But no one else knew that, not yet. Hours earlier, she had been at the briefing table, ignored. The room was dim, the air thick with stale coffee and the drone of an overhead projector. Maps were spread out, arrows and circles scrawled in red ink. The men around her, captains, lieutenants, seasoned operatives, spoke over each other, their voices rising in restless authority. And she leaned forward, waiting for her moment. If we adjust entry by 12 minutes, the satellite blind spot. No one listened. A chair scraped loudly. A joke about the weather cut across her words. Another officer pointed at a chart, his finger slamming down like a gavel. She stopped speaking. Her chest tightened, a familiar burn crawling up her throat. The same burn she'd felt years ago, the day she stood in a hospital hallway with her brother's dog tags clenched in her fist. No one had looked at her then either. No one had known what to say. She swallowed hard, hiding the ache, the memory. They didn't need to know why she was here. They didn't need to understand. Still, she felt invisible, a ghost in combat fatigues. Later outside, the rain came. Fine, cold, persistent. It coated her gloves, slicked her hair against her face. She welcomed it. Rain was honest. It didn't jeer, it didn't dismiss. It simply fell equally on everyone. The street was quiet except for the hum of distant traffic. Her boots stood firm at the memorial steps, posture rigid, rifle angled across her chest. Passers-by came and went. Some glanced, most didn't. A few whispered, respect. She heard that one word, and for a moment the loneliness eased. Until the jeering man arrived. His voice had snapped her back into every memory she tried to bury. The barracks laughter years ago when she first qualified as a marksman. The dismissive smirk from an instructor who had said, "You're only here because they want more women on the roster." The cruel silence after her brother's death, when she had begged to take his place in the unit. And now tonight here he was, some stranger with beer on his breath, pointing, mocking, daring. Why didn't she react immediately? Because reacting too soon is weakness. That's what she told herself. A soldier doesn't lash out. A soldier measures, calculates, waits. So she waited. The man stepped closer, testing her stillness. The laughter of his companions carried in the wind, but beneath it she heard her own pulse, slow but powerful, like a drum, like the echo of boots marching in sync. She thought of her brother, how he used to laugh, not cruelly, never cruelly, but with a sound that filled a room, a sound that made her believe the world was still good. He had believed in her when no one else did. She could almost hear his voice now. "Don't let them see you break, kid." She blinked. The rain slid into her eye, but she didn't raise a hand. Discipline, always discipline. Then it happened. The man took one final step toward her, too close. His voice dropped low, venomous. "What are you, doll? Just a mannequin in uniform." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even his friends fell quiet. The world seemed to shrink, the night pulling taut around her. And then she moved. One step forward, firm, sharp. The sound of her boot against stone cracked the silence like a rifle shot. The man froze, his grin faltered, his eyes darted unsure. Suddenly he wasn't sure if this was a joke anymore. Suddenly he remembered she wasn't just some girl in fatigues, she was a soldier. Behind her blank stare, her mind screamed with memories, with grief, with fury she could never allow herself to show. That single step carried years of unspoken history. And in that moment the man saw it. He saw that weight, that power, that warning. He took a step back. His friends muttered nervously. The mockery drained into silence. But she didn't relax, not yet. Because inside she wasn't fighting him. She was fighting herself. Fighting the loneliness of being unseen, the ache of carrying her brother's shadow, the exhaustion of proving, again and again, that her uniform wasn't a costume. Her jaw clenched, her eyes stayed forward, she let the silence stretch. The man finally muttered something under his breath and walked away. His friends followed. Their footsteps faded into the night. And she remained, still silent, rain dripping from the brim of her cap. But her heart was pounding, her mind unraveling. That single step had saved her dignity, but it had also torn open the wound she worked so hard to hide. Because tomorrow she would step again, into briefing rooms where no one listened, onto missions where no one believed, into memories where her brother still waited for her to make it right. And she knew deep down that one day, one step would not be enough. Not for them. Not for her. She stood guard until dawn. The city slowly woke, headlights cutting through the thinning fog. Civilians passed by, some offering nods, some not even seeing her. She felt the ache in her legs, the weight of the rifle strap biting into her shoulder. Still, she did not move. Inside her a storm brewed, a storm of grief, pride, exhaustion, and determination. But on the surface, only silence. Because sometimes silence is the loudest answer. And though no one else would ever know, that single step tonight had not been meant for the man. It had been meant for herself. That night would follow her into the mission that waited, into the shadows she was about to enter, where the lines between dignity, survival, and revenge would blur. But she hadn't told them that yet. Not at the briefing. Not to anyone. Some truths wait for their own battlefield. And hers was coming. Why was her name the last one called? The list rolled off the commander's tongue. Harris, Cole, Ramirez, Givens, and then after a pause, almost reluctantly, Daniels. Her surname, cold, formal, stripped of everything human. She didn't flinch, but inside something twisted. That pause had been there before, too many times, as if her presence on the roster was always a compromise, as if she was an asterisk in someone else's war. Around the table, the others shuffled their papers, scratched pens across notepads. The mission was laid bare in coordinates and satellite images, an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of a scarred village, believed to be sheltering a high-value courier. If he slipped through tonight, his information could unravel weeks of intel. Her job was clear: overwatch, cover the entry team, eyes on the ridge, trigger finger ready but restrained. She studied the map, memorizing angles, lines of sight, exit routes. She could see it already, the roof tiles slick with dew, the orchard trees casting long shadows, the gravel road leading out of town. She didn't just see it, she was there. But no one asked for her assessment. Instead, the commander's gaze drifted past her, landing on Harris. "You'll take point." Harris nodded, all sharp confidence, already half standing, as though the room had been waiting for him. She stayed still, pen idle in her hand. Her thoughts screamed for release. 12 minutes, that window she had mentioned. The satellite blind spot, they were missing it again. Her lips parted, but she stopped. The memory of last night's jeering still echoed in her bones. The silence that followed her words at every table like this one. She knew what would happen if she spoke. They'd brush it off, call it overthinking, tell her to stick to her scope. And yet, her brother's face flickered in her mind. That grin of his, the way his eyes narrowed when he was dead serious. Say it anyway. Even if they don't listen, say it. You owe yourself that much. Her hand tightened on the pen. She looked at the clock on the wall, 12 minutes. She inhaled once, steady, and finally spoke. Sir, if we delay entry by 12 minutes, the satellite feed will cycle. They won't see our movement. It could reduce the risk of counter-surveillance. The room stilled. The commander's eyes shifted to her, assessing. He didn't dismiss it outright. That in itself was new. Harris frowned, about to interject, but the commander held up a hand. Daniels, show me. The maps were pulled closer. She pointed, tracing the orbit path, aligning the timestamps. Her voice stayed even, but her heart pounded. 12 minutes, that was all. The silence stretched, and then the commander gave a short nod. Adjust the timeline, 12 minutes. Her throat tightened, but she forced her face to stay impassive. No smile, no relief, just discipline. But inside it felt like a breath after drowning. Later in the armory, the weight of her rifle felt different. Familiar, yet heavy with expectation. She checked the chamber, adjusted the scope, ran her fingers across the smooth steel. A voice broke the silence. Not bad in there. She turned. Ramirez leaned against the rack, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He was older, lines around his eyes, voice carrying the weary edge of too many deployments. I've been in these rooms long enough, he said quietly, to know when someone gets ignored. You held your ground. She blinked. No one ever said it outright. No one acknowledged it. I wasn't sure he'd listen, she admitted. Her voice was low, almost ashamed. Ramirez shrugged. Sometimes you plant the seed, sometimes it grows. He paused, then added, your brother, he was like that too. Her chest clenched. You knew him. Ramirez's gaze dropped. We crossed paths, good man, loud laugh. He allowed himself a faint smile. You've got the same eyes, determined, stubborn maybe. Her grip tightened on the rifle. She wanted to ask more. She wanted to know every detail Ramirez carried, every memory he might have. But she also feared what it might unlock. So she nodded once, swallowed hard, and went back to checking her gear. The convoy rolled out just past midnight. The rain had stopped, leaving the world damp, reflective. Headlights sliced through the darkness as the trucks moved silently down empty roads. She sat in the back, helmet resting against the steel wall, the hum of the engine vibrating through her bones. Harris sat across from her, eyes closed, lips moving silently, maybe a prayer, maybe a rehearsal of orders. Ramirez sat beside her, gaze steady, lost in thought. No one spoke. Silence was its own ritual. Her mind drifted to the hospital hallway, to the folded flag, to the look on her mother's face when she said she was enlisting. You don't have to follow him, her mother had whispered. You don't have to prove anything. But she had, not to prove, to redeem. Because the night her brother didn't come home, she had been the one who argued with him. She had told him he was reckless, that he wasn't thinking, that he'd never understand what responsibility really meant. Those were the last words she'd said to him. And when the knock came at the door, she had wanted to scream, to undo every word. But all she could do was take the dog tags from the officer's hand and feel their weight burn into her palm. So yes, she followed him, not to be him, but to carry what he left behind. The convoy slowed, a sharp gesture from the lead vehicle. They were close. The farmhouse loomed ahead, dark and skeletal against the pale sky. Windows shattered. The roof sagged under years of weather. An orchard stretched behind it, trees bending in the wind like watchmen. She took position on the ridge, prone, rifle steady, breath controlled. Through the scope, the world sharpened into detail. Cracks in the farmhouse walls, a door hanging crooked on rusted hinges, shadows shifting in the orchard. Her headset crackled, Overwatch in position. She pressed the mic, copy, eyes on. Voices murmured in her ear, the team moving in, boots crunching softly on gravel. Harris at point, Ramirez covering rear. 12 minutes until the satellite shifted. She scanned, left, right, slow sweeps. The orchard whispered in the wind, a dog barked faintly in the distance. Then a shadow moved. Not her team, not an animal, human, slipping between the trees, low, deliberate. Her finger hovered near the trigger. She exhaled, forcing calm. Possible movement, orchard, she whispered into the mic. The commander's voice cut back. Hold fire, confirm. Her heart thudded. The figure paused at the edge of the trees just inside the scope's circle. She adjusted, focused. A man, rifle slung. He crouched, eyes scanning the farmhouse, unaware of her glass on him. She had him, one squeeze and he was done. But hesitation gripped her. Not tactical hesitation, something deeper. Because for the first time in years, she saw her brother's face in the man's shadow. She blinked, forced herself to breathe. The image dissolved, just a target, just another man. But the memory clung. The night before his last mission, the anger in his eyes when she told him not to go, the way he had turned, saying nothing, leaving her words to hang in the silence. Her finger trembled. Overwatch report, the commander pressed. Her lips parted, the words stuck. She wanted to say she had the shot. She wanted to say she was steady, but something in her wouldn't let her speak. Because in that moment, all she felt was the crushing weight of the past pressing against the trigger. The figure moved again, slipping further toward the farmhouse. Her chance was slipping. Her chest tightened. This was the test, the step she hadn't taken yet. But was she ready? What if the first shot she took wasn't against the enemy, but against herself? Her finger trembled on the trigger, breath caught in her throat. The figure in the orchard shifted, crouching low, almost vanishing into the dark silhouette of the trees. She had him. The shot was clean, the angle perfect. And yet, her brother's shadow clung to the man like smoke. Overwatch, confirm. The commander's voice in her earpiece was sharp now, edged with impatience. She swallowed hard. The world inside the scope seemed to close in, narrowing until all she could see was the man and the faint rise of his shoulders as he inhaled. Her chest constricted. A memory crashed through her defenses. The last morning she'd seen her brother alive. The smell of coffee burned on the stove, the early sunlight spilling across the kitchen table. Him sitting there, boots half-laced, restless, his grin too wide to be real. "You don't understand," he'd said. "I have to be out there." And she had snapped at him. "You don't owe anyone anything. Stop pretending you're invincible." He had gone anyway, and now she was here, rifle to her shoulder, heart breaking against steel. Daniel's status. Her lips parted, she forced the words out. Movement confirmed. One male armed, no clear ID. There was a pause. The commander's voice softened. Rules of engagement stand. Only fire if hostile intent confirmed. Her relief was immediate but guilty. She had delayed. She had doubted. What if that hesitation cost them all? She shifted the scope again. The man disappeared behind the farmhouse. Gone. Her stomach nodded. Below, Harris raised a hand, signaling the team forward. Boots crunched on gravel, rifles lifted. Their shadows stretched long under the pale sliver of moonlight. Daniels, keep eyes on rear. We're going in. She adjusted, scope sweeping, but her vision blurred at the edges, not from fatigue, from shame. Because she hadn't taken the shot, because maybe she should have. The orchard whispered again. Branches swayed. She scanned harder, but the figure had vanished. Her pulse quickened. Had he slipped inside? Was he waiting for them in the dark? She pressed her cheek harder into the stock, steadying herself. Focus, focus, the mission. The entry was swift. A low thud as Harris kicked the door. Flashlights swept through shadows, beams cutting across rotting wood and broken furniture. Voices echoed sharp, controlled. Clear. Clear. Room secure. Then silence. She held her breath, waited for the all clear. Instead, Harris's voice broke through the radio. Contact. One detained. Her body tensed. Was it the man, the one from the orchard? She wanted to ask, but she stayed quiet. Overwatch didn't ask questions. Overwatch waited. Minutes crawled, then static. Then Ramirez's voice hushed but firm. Overwatch, eyes up. We've got movement outside, east side. She pivoted, scope flashing over the tree line. There, shadows breaking. Not one, not two, at least four. Her heart dropped. Multiple tangos approaching. East tree line. Distance 200 meters and closing. The commander's voice snapped back. Hold positions. Harris, secure that detainee. Ramirez, cover east windows. She steadied her breath. Her scope locked on one of the figures. Armed, definitely armed. They moved with purpose, formation sloppy but fast. Her finger curled again. She exhaled. The reticle settled on a chest. She fired. The crack split the night. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, familiar, grounding. Through the scope, she saw the figure crumple into the grass. No shadow this time, no hesitation. She cycled the bolt. Another figure sprinted. She fired again, missed, swore under her breath, adjusted, fired. The orchard erupted in chaos. Shouts in a language she didn't understand. Muzzle flashes sparked from the tree line. Her headset filled with noise. Harris barking orders. Ramirez cursing as glass shattered. The detainee shouting muffled words. Her jaw clenched. Her world shrank to the circle of her scope. Shoot, breathe, adjust, shoot. She dropped another, then another, but there were too many. Her chest burned with adrenaline. The orchard seemed endless, figures spilling out like shadows made flesh. And then her scope froze. Because among them she saw a boy, barely 16, rifle clutched awkwardly, eyes wide, terrified. Her heart lurched. He raised the weapon, trembling, aiming too high, too slow. Her finger hovered, her vision blurred. She saw herself, younger, lost, angry at the world, following her brother down paths she didn't understand. The boy stumbled, almost tripping. The men behind him shoved him forward. He lifted the rifle again, hands shaking. Her throat closed. Overwatch, take the shot. Harris's voice roared in her ear. Her hands shook. He's just a kid. Daniels. The boy steadied the rifle, aimed not at her but at the farmhouse, at her team. Her pulse pounded, every second stretched. Her mind screamed with memories, her brother laughing, her brother leaving, her brother not coming back. If she didn't fire, the boy would. Her breath hitched, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked, the boy fell. Silence swallowed her whole. Her body went numb, the orchard blurred into nothing. The ringing in her ears drowned out the radio. She had killed before, but never like this, never with the echo of childhood staring back through the scope. Her chest caved in. She pressed her forehead against the rifle, eyes burning. Good shot, Harris muttered through the headset, cold, efficient. She wanted to scream, to say it wasn't good, that nothing about it was good. But she stayed silent. Because silence was all she had left. The firefight dragged on. She fired again, forcing her mind to steel itself. The orchard thinned, shadows retreating. The team below secured the farmhouse, the detainee bound and shouting. Finally, the commander's voice cut through. All units hold, area secure. Her rifle lowered, her hands shook. Her cheek left the stock, skin raw from pressing too long. She lay there, chest heaving, the night pressing heavy over her. She thought of the boy again, his eyes, his trembling hands. She thought of her brother, and wondered if, in some cruel way, she had just pulled the trigger on him too. Later, back at the convoy, the team loaded up. Harris clapped her shoulder as he passed. Solid Overwatch. Couldn't have done it without you. She flinched at his touch, didn't meet his eyes, didn't answer. Ramirez paused beside her. His gaze lingered, not judgmental, not praising, just knowing. "You carry them," he said quietly. "Every one of them. Don't let anyone tell you different." She wanted to ask how he lived with it, how he slept at night, but her throat closed around the words. Instead, she nodded once, just once. The truck door slammed shut, the engine roared, the convoy moved into the night. She stared out the window, the orchard fading into darkness behind them. Her reflection in the glass looked hollow, eyes tired, soul heavier. And she knew, tonight wasn't the last time she'd face that choice. The mission was far from over, and the silence inside her was only growing louder. Why did he look at her that way? The detainee's eyes burned, not with fear, not with defiance, but with something she couldn't name. Shame, recognition, a silent accusation that cut deeper than any rifle shot. She kept her distance, rifle slung loosely across her chest. Her boots sank into the muddy edge of the orchard as she approached him. He was bound, hands secured behind his back, knees caked in dirt. Sweat streaked his forehead, mingling with smudges of blood from the firefight. "You shot them all," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "Every one." She flinched. He wasn't supposed to know, not supposed to see her as the one who pulled the trigger, but of course he did. "Rules of engagement," she said softly. Her voice sounded foreign even to her ears. He laughed, bitter and short. "Rules, you mean killing." She kept her gaze down, resisting the urge to flare. Inside, the storm raged. Every memory of last night's jeering, the orchard standoff, the boy's eyes, flashed through her mind. And now this man, standing there as a reminder that her choices carried consequences far beyond herself. "Everyone has a choice," she said finally, almost to herself. "Some make the wrong one." His lips pressed together. He didn't answer, but the silence was heavy, pressing against her like armor. Later in the command vehicle, the detainee was secured in a makeshift holding area. The convoy hummed over uneven terrain, headlights cutting through mist. She sat across from him, knees pressed together, rifle resting on her lap. She watched him, tried to read him. He was young, maybe 22, not a hardened soldier, not a fanatic, just lost like a boy she could have known anywhere under different circumstances. "Why are you doing this?" he finally asked, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "You don't even know me." She didn't answer, because the truth was far more complicated. She did know him, in a way. She knew the fear that made a person pick up a weapon they weren't ready to wield. She knew the stubborn pride that pushed them into recklessness. She knew the loneliness that sharpened every mistake. Her brother had been all of that, and more. The detainee's eyes caught hers. "You feel it, don't you, the weight?" Her throat tightened. "Always." He studied her, carefully, almost like he understood. "You think that makes you strong, but it's only the beginning. The weight, it never leaves." She swallowed. He was right. It didn't, it wouldn't. The convoy stopped at a temporary forward base, tents and concrete barriers marking the periphery. The detainee was transferred under heavy watch. She followed, silent, watching every movement. Inside the holding area, guards moved him into a small room. She lingered at the threshold, feeling like an intruder in a world she wasn't supposed to inhabit. The detainee turned, meeting her eyes. "You could let me go," he said. A smirk threatened to form but died halfway. "But you won't. You'll do what you have to do, always." She turned away, couldn't meet him, because he was right. She always did, she always would. That night, alone in her tent, she sat on the edge of the cot, rifle beside her, headset coiled neatly. Rain pattered against the canvas, a constant, hollow rhythm. She replayed the orchard over and over. The boy, the other men, her own hands shaking despite years of training. She couldn't sleep, not yet. She pressed her forehead to her knees and whispered into the darkness. "I didn't mean I did." But words were useless. She had learned that long ago. The night her brother didn't come home, words had failed. Only action remained, only choices. And now each choice she made carried the echo of him. Every mission, every target, every life or death tied back to the boy she couldn't save, the brother she couldn't bring back. Morning broke in muted shades of gray. Fog clung to the perimeter of the base, blending with the faint smell of burning diesel and wet canvas. She moved slowly, rifle in hand, boots sinking into mud, carrying the exhaustion of a sleepless night. The commander's voice cut through the quiet. "Daniels, briefing in 10, you're up." Her stomach knotted. Up, she wasn't ready. Not for the briefing, not for the next step, not for whatever decisions lay ahead. She entered the room. Maps, tables, figures. The team already there, drinking black coffee, murmuring over satellite feeds. The detainee's presence dominated the mission now. Intelligence suggested he held details critical to operations in the area. Extraction protocols were complex, and everyone expected results. Fast. Her pulse quickened. Every eye seemed to fall on her, even Harris, who had moments before clapped her on the shoulder. Now, they looked at her as though the weight of the detainee's fate rested on her alone. And in a way it did. She traced the satellite images again, calculating angles, exit routes, cover positions. She calculated, she measured, she anticipated. She had done this countless times, but the detainee added a new variable: humanity. She imagined him alone in the holding cell, staring at the walls, thinking about what had brought him here. And she remembered the boy in the orchard, the same fear in his eyes. Her fingers clenched around the edge of the table. She could not let him die, not unnecessarily, not without reason. "Daniels," the commander's voice snapped her back. "Assessment." She exhaled. "Extraction route from the east is clear. Surveillance shows minimal movement. There's a blind spot on the northwest corridor. If we move through there, we avoid detection and reduce risk of engagement. However," she paused, the room leaned in. "The detainee is agitated. If approached aggressively, there's risk of resistance. Coordination is critical." The room was silent. No one spoke. The tension was thick. Finally, the commander nodded. "Good. You'll lead Overwatch for the extraction. Harris and Ramirez cover the team." Her throat burned. Relief, guilt, pride, all tangled together. And beneath it, the faintest pulse of fear. She walked out of the briefing, adjusting her gear. The tent flaps billowed in the wind, the fog wrapping around her like a cloak. She paused. A thought came unbidden. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She repeated it in her mind. Let it anchor her. The detainee's eyes, the boy's eyes, her brother's eyes, all waiting. She would not fail them. Because failing meant more than losing a mission. It meant losing herself. She lifted her rifle, checked the scope, tested the weight. The morning fog dampened the sound of boots. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of her steps. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a flicker of hope. Not for the world, not for recognition, not even for herself. For him, her brother. The mission stretched ahead. Danger lay waiting, sharp and uncompromising. And yet, for the first time in a long while, she believed she could face it without losing the part of herself that mattered most. Because some battles, external or internal, demand courage, but some demand something harder, the ability to feel and act anyway. She inhaled, exhaled, tightened her grip. The step she would take next would not just be physical, it would be moral, emotional, unforgiving. And she would walk it alone, as always. Why did the fog feel heavier tonight? It clung to her like a warning, seeping through her uniform, into her boots, into her chest. She crouched on the ridge again, rifle resting lightly against her shoulder, eyes sweeping the faint outlines of the compound below. Every shadow seemed deliberate, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. Her headset crackled, Overwatch in position. "Copy," she whispered, voice low, steady, but trembling just slightly. The convoy had arrived hours ago, slipping through the morning mist. The detainee had been restless, packing in his secured seat, hands chained. Eyes flicking toward her, again and again, as if he could see through the fog of her mind. She shifted, scanning east, northwest, and the small perimeter of the extraction zone. The satellite window was closing. Every second counted. Harris crouched beside the compound, checking the positions of his team. Ramirez moved silently to cover the south side. And she remained above, perched in her overwatch post, the weight of every life in the compound pressing against her spine. Her heart tightened, because this wasn't just a mission, not anymore. It was an echo of the orchard, the boy she had shot, the man she had detained, the brother she had lost. Every decision carried the memory of loss, the reminder of what failure could cost. Movement. At first subtle, the detainee shifted in his seat, then a shadow moved across the compound. A guard or maybe a scout checking the perimeter. Her breath hitched, fingers pressed lightly on the stock. East corridor clear, she reported, but minor activity detected northwest, outside the blind spot. Copy, the commander replied. Proceed with caution. Harris, Ramirez, prepare for engagement. She scanned, scope sweeping. Shadows flickered against walls, the wind rustling broken roof tiles. The detainee shifted again, muttering under his breath. She caught fragments of words, foreign and sharp. He was scared, and yet calm in a way she couldn't define. Her mind drifted briefly. That boy in the orchard, how his fear had mirrored her own once. She tightened her jaw, no room for distraction, not here. The extraction team moved into position, silent steps across gravel and mud. She held them in sight through the scope, each movement calculated. Harris crouched low, signaling. Ramirez covered the flanks. The detainee, silent, obeying, hands chained but walking steadily. The first shot cracked. A bullet whizzed past her, slicing through the air. Her heart slammed. She dropped slightly, adjusting her scope. Figures emerged from the tree line, at least 3, armed, moving fast. She exhaled slowly, letting her training take over. One shot, another, a third. The orchard erupted into chaos. The detainee froze, eyes wide, fear visible, human. Her finger trembled. Do I shoot? Every second stretched. The wind, the fog, the weight of her past pressing into the barrel of her rifle. She fired again, controlled. A man crumpled, then another. Harris shouted over the radio, giving tactical commands. Ramirez covered the south flank, calling out positions. And she watched, calculated, survived. Her heart pounded like a drum inside her chest, echoing the steps of soldiers below. Sweat ran down her temples, fingers numb from tension. Suddenly, the detainee stumbled. A guard had struck him lightly with the butt of a rifle, forcing him toward the extraction point. Her eyes caught a glint of movement. Another shadow emerged behind the tree line, fast, deliberate, closing on the team. Her breath tightened, another shot precise. The figure crumpled. Her hands shook as she cycled the bolt. Not just skill, not just reflex. Necessity. The convoy moved closer, muddy tires crunching on gravel. The detainee was almost inside the armored vehicle. She could see it now, the door opening, Harris helping him inside, Ramirez signaling all clear. But one shadow remained, a small figure darting toward the detainee. Her eyes widened, recognition hit, it's the boy. No. He was alive. Somehow surviving the orchard that night, he had reappeared. His eyes found hers, wide with terror and confusion, rifle clutched, hands shaking. Her body went rigid. This was not a target anymore, not just a mission. Her training screamed at her, neutralize the threat. Her conscience screamed louder, he's just a boy. Her finger hovered. The scope's crosshair rested gently on his chest. She exhaled, slowly, deeply. Don't move, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The boy froze. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears. And then he lowered the rifle, trembling. Relief? No, something heavier. She knew he'd remember, as she would remember the orchard, every life she'd touched, every death she had caused. The detainee was safely inside the vehicle now. The convoy moved. The fog swallowed the shadows. Her hand still shook. But for the first time since the orchard, she felt control. Back at the forward base, the detainee secured, she lowered her rifle. Mud caked her boots. Rain from early morning storms seeped through her uniform. Her muscles ached, her heart raced. Ramirez clapped her on the shoulder. Solid overwatch, you kept them alive. She nodded once, couldn't speak. Words would betray everything inside her. Harris glanced at her briefly. No praise, no judgment, just acknowledgement she didn't need more. She moved to the perimeter, sitting against a cold concrete barrier. The detainee's eyes caught hers through the holding area window. Not pleading, not accusing, observing, calculating, human. Her chest tightened. She remembered the boy again, the orchard, the weight of her past pressing down. She breathed, let the night's tension drain slowly, reluctantly. Later, alone in her tent, she removed her gloves, loosened her boots. Mud and blood and rain stained her uniform. Her rifle lay across her lap. The echoes of the night replayed endlessly. The boy's eyes, the detainee's fear, her own hesitation. Every decision made, every life spared or taken, circling inside her skull. She remembered her brother again. His laughter, the morning sunlight, the words she couldn't take back. And she whispered into the quiet, sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Her reflection in the tent flap stared back at her, tired, worn, human, but alive. Because surviving was not just about firepower or strategy. It was about bearing the weight, feeling it, acting anyway. The next step would be harder. The next mission would demand more than skill. It would demand choice, morality, endurance. And she knew she was ready, not because she felt whole, not because the past was gone, but because she had learned how to stand even when the weight threatened to crush her. Even when silence was the only answer. Why did he whisper it like a secret? The detainee's voice trembled, almost drowned by the hum of the generator. He sat on the hard cot in the holding cell, eyes darting to her every time she moved. Chains clinked softly against the metal frame as he shifted. They're coming tonight," he said. The words were barely audible, swallowed by the damp air and the scent of mud and diesel. "You don't understand. You have to stop them before they leave." Her pulse hitched. She crouched beside the cell, rifle resting against her shoulder. "Explain," she demanded softly. He leaned forward, a glimmer of panic in his eyes. "High-value shipment, not just weapons, documents, information that could undo months of work. They're moving it, soon. If you intercept, you'll save lives. If you don't, people will die, innocent people." Her stomach twisted. The weight of responsibility pressed against her spine like a steel plate. Every mission carried risk. But now it wasn't just tactical. It was moral, human, personal. She swallowed. Her fingers tightened on the stock of her rifle. "Where?" The detainee glanced around the cell as though the walls themselves might betray him. "Warehouse at the edge of the village, east side. Midnight. You'll need to move fast. Avoid the patrols. Only a small window. Only you can." He trailed off, fear overtaking his words. She nodded, not because she agreed, but because she had no other choice. Her mind spun. She thought of the boy in the orchard. She thought of the detainee himself, and inevitably her brother. Every mission was supposed to be black and white. Enemy, ally, target, civilian. But this was gray, moral fog thicker than the mist outside. She left the cell, boots crunching softly on gravel. The tent flap swayed in the wind, carrying the faint scent of rain-soaked dirt. Ramirez waited nearby, rifle slung over his shoulder. His eyes met hers, silent, patient, understanding. "You okay?" he asked. She shook her head, almost imperceptibly. "I have to plan the extraction. Intel just came through." Ramirez nodded. No judgment, no questions, just presence. A reminder she wasn't entirely alone. The commander approached. Daniels, we've got a small window. Midnight. You'll lead Overwatch. Harris and Ramirez will cover the team. She nodded, a tight coil of determination wound inside her. Not excitement, not pride, not even confidence. Only focus. Because she knew that beyond the tactical challenge lay the real test. Decision, morality, restraint. Hours passed. She traced the route repeatedly on the map. Calculated angles, satellite feed timing, patrol movements, timing, always timing. 12 minutes, the same window she had argued for in the briefing. 12 minutes could save lives or doom them. Her thoughts drifted to her brother again, the day he left, the hospital hallway, the dog tags in her hand, the helplessness. She pressed her lips together. She couldn't dwell, not now. Her rifle was checked, scope clean, trigger calibrated. Every detail mattered. Precision was survival. And yet it was never enough. Night fell like a shroud. Fog rolled across the perimeter of the forward base, ghosting over tents and armored vehicles. She moved to her overwatch position, prone on the ridge, binoculars scanning the horizon. The team below shifted into formation, silent and deliberate. Harris crouched beside the warehouse, checking entry points. Ramirez patrolled the south flank. She covered all angles, breathing slow, heart steady. Through her scope, the village looked peaceful, still, innocent. The kind of place where children might play in daylight, unaware of the shadows threading through their streets. And yet danger lurked, always lurking, waiting. She exhaled, focused. The detainee's warning echoed in her mind. Only she could prevent disaster. Only she could carry the weight. Movement. Figures slipping across rooftops. Patrols unaware of the team moving below. Her scope tracked every detail, the slight tilt of a head, the glint of metal, the rhythm of steps. Harris signaled. The team advanced. Through the scope she saw the detainee again, silent, hands chained, walking steadily to extraction. His eyes met hers briefly. Recognition, fear, relief. She felt the sting of both. A shadow moved closer, another figure approaching the detainee. Her fingers tightened. This was the moment. The rules of engagement allowed her to fire. The mission demanded it. Yet, restraint called louder than any order. She exhaled slowly, steeled herself. The figure paused. Did he see her? Was he aware of her presence? Yes. And yet he hesitated. Her training, her instinct screamed at her to act, to neutralize, to survive. Her conscience screamed louder, not yet. The figure retreated, slipping into the shadows. Her pulse slowed, relief and guilt collided. Because she knew every hesitation carried consequences. Every choice left a mark she would carry forever. The extraction proceeded. The team moved swiftly, disciplined. Harris guided the detainee into the armored vehicle. Ramirez covered the flanks. She watched, covered, calculated every step. But the moral fog didn't lift. She remembered the orchard, the boy, the man she had shot, the detainee she had detained. Every life she touched, every life she took, echoed inside her like a drumbeat she could never silence. The convoy rolled out of the village, mud splashing, engines humming, tires crunching. Every mile carried weight. She exhaled, but the tension didn't leave. Because the detainee looked at her again, his eyes sharp, almost accusatory, not in anger, in awareness. "You could have stopped them," he said softly, "without killing." Her stomach nodded. He was right. But she had also acted to save others. Every shot had been measured, every decision deliberate. Yet the moral cost, unquantifiable. Back at the base, she removed her gear. Rifle leaned against the cot, boots muddy, hands shaking slightly from tension. Ramirez approached quietly. "You did what you had to do." She didn't respond. She couldn't. She thought of her brother again, his laugh, his stubborn pride, the last morning sunlight in the kitchen. Her fingers traced the dog tags tucked inside her uniform. Weight, memory, responsibility. "You carry them all," Ramirez said. "Every decision, every life. Don't let anyone tell you different." She nodded, not for him, not for the commander, for herself. For her brother. Later, alone, she stared out into the fog-shrouded night. The faint glow of the base lights reflected off wet canvas. The detainee rested quietly in the secured vehicle. No celebrations, no relief, only awareness. She whispered to the night, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Her reflection in the tent flap was tired, worn, human. But alive. The next mission loomed, the moral fog thickened, the weight persisted. And yet she knew she would face it, not because she felt strong, not because she felt ready, but because she had to. Because surviving meant carrying the weight, acting, choosing, living. The fog rolled over the base, silent, cold, inevitable. And she breathed, steadying herself, preparing for the next step, whatever it might demand. Why did the alarm sound too late? The night erupted in chaos before she even had a chance to steady herself. The convoy had nearly cleared the village when a shrill warning pierced the radio static. Movement detected, too close, too fast. Her heartbeat spiked, fingers clenched on the rifle stock. "Contact east side," Harris barked. His voice was sharp, clipped with tension. "Repeat, east side, multiple hostiles closing in." Through the scope, she saw shadows darting across the wet ground, glinting weapons catching the faint glow of streetlights. Patrols, or worse, reinforcements from somewhere deeper in the village. She exhaled slowly. This was no longer about rules, no longer about calculation. Survival, immediate. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Bang! Another shadow dropped. Bang! The second fell. The convoy jerked violently as bullets ricocheted off metal. Harris shouted orders, engines roaring as they tried to accelerate through the narrow, debris-strewn streets. Her eyes darted between targets, precision, speed, morality blurred into instinct. And then she saw him. The detainee, eyes wide, pulled violently to the side as a stray shot glanced past. Her chest tightened. No, not him. "Cover," she yelled into the headset almost reflexively. "Cover the detainee." Harris shifted. Ramirez opened fire, suppressing the nearest threat. But the enemy pressed forward relentlessly, pushing them back into a corner. The convoy screeched, tires spitting mud. She fired again, suppressive shots, her scope finding every shadow threatening them. And still the weight pressed down. Every pull of the trigger, every shadow she neutralized, reminded her of the orchard, of the boy she had shot, of the detainee she now protected. Every life she had touched, every moral compromise pressed down like lead. The convoy hit the warehouse perimeter. Harris and Ramirez leapt into action, securing the detainee and dragging him toward the armored vehicle. Her eyes scanned the rooftops. Shadows still moved. Bullets cracked overhead. Then a new threat. Explosions, not near them but close enough to shake the ground under her hands. Windows shattered. Fire licked the edges of nearby buildings. The team froze mid-motion. Hesitation cost lives. Her finger twitched. She fired again, taking out a man advancing toward the detainee. Another. She could feel every heartbeat, every breath, every moral decision colliding with instinct. The detainee ducked low into the vehicle, safe for now. Her chest burned, every muscle ached, her mind reeled. A sudden scream. She turned. Harris had taken a blow to the shoulder. Blood seeped through his uniform. Ramirez returned fire, but a man broke cover and lunged at them. Her hands shook. "Daniels," Harris shouted, voice strained. She ran, moving across open ground, ignoring the risk. Rifle raised, calculated shot. Bang, neutralized threat. Ramirez shouted, "Move him, get him inside." The detainee, eyes wide, gripped the edge of the vehicle. fear mingled with confusion. Her chest heaved. She fired once more, covering the team as they scrambled into the armored truck. The convoy roared to life, engines straining. Tires spat mud. The enemy fell back, reevaluating their strategy, but she knew they weren't finished. She exhaled slowly, heart racing, morality screaming, survival overriding every instinct except the one that whispered, "Protect." The convoy moved into open terrain, away from the village. Rain's slick roads reflected the moonlight. She kept eyes on the perimeter, scanning for shadows. Silence, a fragile temporary calm. She leaned against the armor plating, breathing hard, eyes closed for a fraction of a second. Images flashed. The boy in the orchard, the detainee's wary gaze, her brother's last morning. Ramirez's voice broke through. "You okay?" She opened her eyes, nodded, "I'm fine." But she was. Because she knew that moral fog never lifted. It clung. It followed. Every choice, every hesitation, every life touched, it stayed. She thought of her brother, his stubborn pride, his laughter, the dog tags tucked against her chest. And she whispered, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." The convoy reached a safe perimeter. The detainee was secured in the holding area. Harris received medical attention. Ramirez kept a watchful eye on the surroundings. She collapsed against a barrier. Her hands shook, sweat and rain mingling on her skin. She had survived. And yet she felt hollow. Hours later, in the temporary operations center, the commander debriefed the team. Satellite feeds, patrol movements, enemy engagement, all replayed. She listened detached. Her mind drifted. The detainee sat quietly in a corner, chains removed, eyes studying her, calculating, aware. He finally spoke, voice low, almost reverent. "You saved lives tonight, but at what cost?" Her throat tightened. She didn't answer, couldn't. He studied her again. "You carry them all, don't you?" She nodded faintly. The truth spilled without words. "Yes," she whispered, "every one." The detainee didn't respond. He simply observed, understanding, or pretending to. She didn't care. Because she knew the truth. Every action, every life, every decision, they all weighed her down. But surviving meant carrying it, acting anyway, choosing, living. Alone later, she stood at the edge of the base. The fog rolled over the perimeter, soft and cold. She held her rifle loosely, looking out into the night. Memories pressed in. The boy, the detainee, her brother, every face etched into her mind. Her reflection stared back from a puddle on the ground, tired, human, alive. She whispered again, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." And for the first time she believed it, not because she felt unbroken, not because she felt ready, but because she had chosen to act, to survive, to carry the weight. The night was quiet now, fragile, temporary. But she knew tomorrow the fog would return, the next step would come. And she would face it. Because that was what it meant to be her, to live, to carry, to act. And perhaps, finally, to forgive herself. Why did silence feel heavier than gunfire? The aftermath was deafening. The convoy had returned to base, engines off, mud-caked tires still steaming. Rain had stopped, leaving the ground slick and reflective, mirrors for the dark sky. She sat quietly, rifle resting across her lap, eyes scanning the horizon. The detainee had been secured in a reinforced holding area, now silent, restrained, and still observing. No words passed between them, but understanding flowed silently, an unspoken bond forged through fear, survival, and the weight of choice. Her hands shook, not from fatigue, but from everything she had carried in the last 24 hours. The boy in the orchard, the firefight, Harris wounded, the detainee, and the ghost of her brother. She let herself breathe, slowly, carefully. And remembered. Back in the tent, she cleaned her rifle. The repetition, the precision, grounded her. Every stroke of the cloth across the barrel, every click of the stock, brought a rhythm to the chaos that had consumed her. Ramirez entered silent, carrying 2 cups of lukewarm coffee. He handed her one. No words, just presence. She accepted it with a nod, taking a slow sip. Bitter, grounded, necessary. "They're secure," Ramirez finally said, voice low. "All accounted for." She exhaled. Relief was there, faint and fragile, but guilt lingered. She thought of the boy, of the men she had fired upon. Every life taken, every life spared. It was a ledger she couldn't balance. "Do you ever stop carrying it?" she asked, almost whispering. Ramirez shrugged, sitting beside her. "No, but you learn to carry it without breaking. That's all we get." She stared into the coffee, seeing the reflection of the tent flap, shadows moving across the canvas. She remembered her brother's laughter, the early morning sunlight on the kitchen table. And she realized something. Some weight was meant to remain. Some choices were never undone. Outside, the fog began to lift. First slowly, then with urgency, sunlight streaking across the horizon, cutting through the mist like a knife. She stepped out, rifle slung over her shoulder, boots sinking into wet mud. The detainee's cell was secure, guards watching, but she lingered nearby, eyes tracing the shadows, calculating, waiting. He looked back at her through the reinforced glass, quiet, observant, almost human. She remembered his words from before. "You carry them all, don't you?" She nodded faintly. "Yes," she whispered to herself, "every one." And for a moment, the detainee nodded slightly, acknowledging what he could never understand fully, yet recognizing the truth of it. The team gathered for debriefing. Maps, satellite images, patrol movements, enemy intel, everyone accounted for. Mission success confirmed. Her commander gave a short nod, no praise, no ceremony. Efficiency over sentiment. She expected nothing else. Harris clapped her shoulder. "Good work out there, solid overwatch, couldn't have made it without you." Her eyes met his, she forced a nod, couldn't smile, couldn't speak. The fog inside her remained, heavy, unavoidable, real. But she felt a shift, small, fragile. Because surviving wasn't about celebration, not anymore. It was about continuation, acting anyway, carrying the weight, living. Later she walked alone along the ridge, mud squelching under her boots, the base fatting behind her, the fog lifting, revealing the skeletal outline of the village they had just escaped. She paused. The wind touched her face, cold and real. The scent of wet earth filled her lungs. Memories returned, the boy, the detainee, her brother. Faces blurred with rain, blood, and fog, but they were there, and she had survived. She knelt, picking up a small piece of debris, a shard of wood from the village, soaked and jagged. She turned it over in her hands, feeling the weight, the texture, the reality of all that had happened. Her reflection appeared in the puddle at her feet, tired, worn, human, alive. She whispered to the morning, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." She stood slowly, lifting her rifle, ready. Not because the mission was over, not because the weight had lifted, but because she had learned how to carry it. And surviving, she realized, was more than firepower or training. It was endurance, it was conscience, it was choice. She remembered her brother again, early sunlight, the dog tags she still carried, the moments she had failed to protect, the ones she had survived. A quiet peace settled in her chest, not full, not complete, but enough. Because sometimes being a soldier meant more than bullets and tactics. It meant heart, strength, silence, sacrifice, humanity. The detainee watched from the reinforced cell window, eyes sharp but still, not pleading, not accusing, understanding in the way only shared trauma and survival could forge. She looked out across the ridge, fog lifting further, revealing the valley below. The world was still, fragile, alive. And she smiled faintly, not for herself, not for glory, but because she had acted. Because she had survived. Because somehow dignity had spoken through her actions, through her choices, through the courage to carry the weight. The sun broke fully over the horizon, golden and relentless, Shadows retreated. The world waited. And she was ready. Standing tall, rifle slung. Mud, rain, and scars marking her uniform. Eyes steady, mind clear. Heart heavy yet alive. Sometimes courage didn't roar. It breathed quietly. It acted silently. And she had breathed it. She had acted. The fog lifted. The valley glimmered. A new day began. And she walked into it carrying everything, and yet somehow free.